Hello, class. This will be the last time you'll be hearing from me and having a look at my ugly mug on your computer. This is the wrapping it up lecture. I'm going to get into just a little bit of summary of what we covered this semester, this quick month, and talk about why I think these things are important and how I would like you to remember them and use them in the future. So, just to remember that the very first thing we addressed was the rhetorical situation. You'll probably notice I'm kind of obsessed with the rhetorical situation. I've mentioned it over and over again throughout the month. That is the elements of audience, purpose, and context as an approach to analyzing a business writing situation. Before you actually write it, you should think about who am I writing this to, what's important to them, what's my relationship with them, what do they want to get out of my writing. That's the audience. The purpose, what do I personally want to accomplish as the author? What are all the end results that I'm seeking as the author? And then, of course, the context, which is very broad because it addresses both the medium that you're using, the genre that you're using. Is this a memo? Is this an email, etc.? It also addresses the place and time in which you compose it and all the factors that have affected that composition, what kind of tools you used to compose it, what was going on around you in the room as you composed it, but also it addresses the response and what was going on in the room as your audience was reading it. Were they busy? Were they overwhelmed? Did this appear on a stack of papers? Is there other people who are going to read this? What's the corporate culture? What are the values that this company has? What are the values this industry has? That's all the context. So I kept on mentioning audience, purpose, and context because I want you all to be able to adapt your writing to every situation you get into. And you can't do that if I just tell you here's the right way and here's the wrong way to do business writing. Instead, I wanted to give you this framework so that you can use this in each and every situation. This even will be applicable outside of business writing. This will be applicable to writing composition, writing science, writing medical and health writing. All these things are all come down to audience, purpose, and context. I even hope that audience, purpose, and context affects the way you communicate in your daily life, in your relationships, with your friends, socially. Your social communication is affected by audience, purpose, and context. So that's the most important thing I want you to remember from week one, be able to analyze those things. Week two, we looked into organizing, drafting, and revising your communications. Remember, there are multiple forms of organization. There are also some hybrids of organization where you combine two or three different types of organization. And I think one of the best things you can do with organization is just put an outline together based on your audience, purpose, and context before you actually write the communication, because that'll give you kind of a broad view, kind of a blueprint of what you're going to be addressing in the communication. And then all you got to do is just kind of put the meat on the bones. So you start with an outline. I got into some drafting on chapter 3. We talked about drafting and the things that go into that writing process. Talked about the importance of letting yourself write badly for a little while, that you just kind of get all your thoughts down on the page. You don't worry about censoring yourself or editing yourself just then, but you just express the stuff on the page. And then you have your revision stage, which is where you take your own analytical mind, your own critical thinking process to your own writing. And you ask yourself, given the rhetorical situation, is my organizational pattern the best? Is my development solid enough? Do I have evidence and examples and research to support this? Is my tone creating a great impression of me? Is it creating the right impression of me? Is there a possibility that my reader might ignore what I'm trying to say or miss the point I'm trying to make? These are all questions in revision. Revision also looks at some of the local issues of how's my grammar, how's my spelling, my punctuation, my mechanics. One thing I don't think I mentioned is a great technique for revision when you're looking at the local issues like grammar, spelling, etc., is to actually read your communication backwards, one sentence at a time, and then you're isolating each sentence. And you can ask yourself, is this a complete sentence? Does this have the consistent noun and pronouns that I need? Does this have the noun and verbs that I need on a sentence by sentence basis? Because then that's going to, when you read your stuff, it's going to sound right to you because you wrote it. But if you read it a little bit differently from a different perspective, then you're going to be able to pick up on some of the errors. So that's a revision. Style and tone. Every single rhetorical situation requires a different style. Some people say a writer has one style and that's the style they stick with. I don't think that should be the case. I think that you need to alter and change your style as the situation dictates it. Tone is extremely important because tone is basically how you feel about what you're saying, how you feel about the message that you're communicating. And it comes down to word choices and the attitudes and the ideas that are associated with the words that you're using and the connotations of those words. So those are tone. And then structure, this is somewhat related to organization because structure is basically the arrangement of the information. When you say something and why you say it. What are you going to say in the first paragraph? What are you going to say in the body paragraph? Why? How is it going to be more effective for you to take what you're trying to say and put that in the middle of the paragraph? Just thinking consciously about the different locations of the information. We got into week 3, which is just a practice of the actual business correspondences that you're going to see. Now remember, those main ones are memos, letters, and emails. Emails is the number one. Memos and letters is email is kind of a hybrid of memos and letters. A lot of the same rules are going to apply. Your emails will be very similarly formatted to memos. And memos are still common in the workplace. So it's important that you're versed in memos. We also got into informal reports, which is going to be often internal reports where you write information that's meant for somebody within your company. And we got into formal reports, which is often going to be external, where you write to somebody who's outside of your company. You might be trying to persuade them of something, to persuade them to accept your services, to persuade them to make some kind of change. That's in chapter 11. Proposals was addressed, that was chapter 13. Proposals is extremely important because that's your problem solving. That's solving problems by writing and knowing the different forms of proposals that you can have. Again, external proposals, internal proposals, proposals that seek to get a sales, that seek sales, that seek purchases of some kind. There's also proposals that seek changes. And that's one of the most persuasive types of communication you're going to do, where you actually try to change the mind of your reader. And in order to change the mind of your reader, you need to use rhetoric, which is defined by Aristotle as using every available means of persuasion. So the audience purpose and context provides a rich amount of means of persuasion, thinking about their values, thinking about what matters to them, their goals, etc. Getting specific about what your purpose is, seeking that end result, and the using the medium that's going to give you the credibility and the authority that you need. I think we briefly mentioned web-based communication, emails, making wise decisions about when you email, etc. And then week 4, what you're just finishing up right now, is your job search. I believe that week 4 was the ultimate application of all these concepts because there's nothing more rhetorical than a job application letter, for example, where you're actually trying to create an impression of yourself that is going to make somebody want to hire you, or at least to give you an interview. And then within the interview, to create an impression of yourself and to manage that impression in order to get the job. We talked about how you can find jobs. We looked at web-based publishing or web-based job openings. We looked at inquiring with other people. We looked at internships. We addressed cover letters and resumes, which always travel together. The cover letter should be, one of the most important things you can remember is that the cover letter must always be customized depending on the job description. That's how you're going to stand apart. The same goes for the resumes. Adjust it for what you think this job description is looking for, and that's how you're going to stand apart from others. We talked briefly about interviews as well. Just most important thing is to remember to think about what questions you're going to ask and answer before you actually do it, and sit down and kind of study and prepare for it. So the last thing I'm going to ask you to do is a 40-point comprehensive test, which is going to give you a series of rhetorical situations. Part 1 is asking you to look at some business communication and to analyze the choices that the writer of that communication made based on audience purpose and context. Part 2 is asking you to look at a scenario in which you might have to write, and then describing in detail how you yourself would negotiate the audience purpose and context and the choices that you would make. And part 3 actually is a writing prompt that asks you to write a 1 to 2 page proposal based on the scenario, and then reflect for about 150 to 200 words about why you made the choices that you did regarding audience purpose and context. That's all we have for this month. Sorry that I didn't get to know all of you more. It's kind of tricky with an accelerated class. I really wish I could have communicated with you one-on-one more. Maybe you can come visit me in office hours sometime if you want, in Curtin 582. I would love to meet you all. I really hope that you apply a lot of the things that you learn in this class to your careers. That's ultimately what I want, is I want you to get the jobs that you love to have, and I want you to be successful in those jobs. Please stay in touch if you want letters of recommendation. I can provide that. Send emails to me. It's fine with me. I'll give you recommendations, and thank you for all your hard work this semester.